When you think of India, it's often, vibrant colors, ancient traditions,
Mhm.
this incredible depth of history.
Absolutely, a really rich tapestry. But woven into that is this, this stark reality that still impacts millions today, the caste system.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. We're going deep into this enduring social hierarchy.
We want to explore where it came from, its origins, and maybe more surprisingly, how it continues to make its presence felt in modern India.
Yeah, our mission here for you listening is to really get a handle on the core ideas behind the system and understand its consequences even now in the 21st century.
And we're working from source materials that give us both that historical background and a view of what's happening, on the ground today.
So origins, where does this whole thing start?
Well, the earliest traces, you could say, of what eventually became the caste system go way back. We're talking around 1500 BCE.
Okay.
This is linked to the arrival of the Indo-Aryan people, and the initial concept was called Varna.
Varna, right? And that involved four main groups.
That's right. Yeah, the Brahmins, they were the priests, the scholars, then the Kshatriyas, the warriors, rulers, administrators.
Got it.
Third, the Vaishyas, merchants, traders, farmers.
Grand final.
The Shudras, they were the laborers, the service providers.
So on the surface, it sounds maybe like a framework for organizing society, dividing up the work.
That seems to have been the initial intention, maintaining order, social balance, that sort of thing.
But it didn't stay that simple or flexible, did it?
No, definitely not. That's the crucial part. Over centuries, this system, it hardened. It became much more rigid, much less adaptable.
And that's when we see the emergence of literally thousands of subcastes, the jatis.
Exactly, jatis. And this is where it gets incredibly complex and, frankly, for many, deeply oppressive.
Because it shifted from being about your job to being about, your birth.
Precisely. It became hereditary. Your caste determined pretty much everything.
Like your occupation, who you were allowed to marry, even where you could live.
Your whole life path, essentially predetermined by the family you were born into. Limited, if any, chance to change your station.
Okay, so we've got this increasingly rigid hierarchy, but then things get even more complex and frankly much darker. We need to talk about those who were considered outside the system altogether.
Yes, this is a really critical and disturbing development. The creation, essentially, of a group deemed untouchable.
Now often referred to as Dalits.
Correct. They were considered so ritually impure, supposedly, that they were placed entirely outside the four Varnas, below the lowest rung.
And their experience, historically, it was just profound exclusion.
Absolutely. The sources describe how they were often forced to live on the outskirts of villages, couldn't use the same wells as others.
Denied access to temples, restricted from social gatherings.
It was systematic segregation. And layered on top of that was just horrendous discrimination, violence, and exploitation. Their basic humanity was often denied.
And we should also bring in the Adivasis here, shouldn't we? India's indigenous tribal peoples.
Yes, definitely. They represent another group that faced, and still faces, significant marginalization. Although perhaps through slightly different historical processes.
Often pushed off their lands, right? During colonization and even after independence.
Yes, displacement due to development projects, resource extraction. It left many Adivasi communities incredibly vulnerable, often outside the mainstream social and economic structures.
Okay, so fast forward. India gains independence in 1947. A new constitution comes in 1950.
A landmark moment.
And that constitution explicitly outlaws untouchability. It prohibits discrimination based on caste.
It does. On paper, a huge step forward.
So you listening might think, okay, problem solved then. The caste system is history.
If only it were that simple. This is where we see that massive gap between the law and the lived reality for millions.
Because the practice persists. Deeply entrenched attitudes don't just disappear with legislation.
Especially in rural areas, yes. But even in urban centers, it operates in more subtle ways. The discrimination continues.
And some of the examples from the sources are just, they're deeply troubling. We still hear about Dalit children being refused entry into schools.
Just because of who their parents are. It's appalling.
And then there's the practice of manual scavenging.
Which is illegal. Explicitly illegal.
But it still happens. People overwhelmingly from the lowest castes, forced into this incredibly dangerous and dehumanizing work of cleaning human waste by hand.
It's a stark reminder of how deep these hierarchies run, that such practices can continue even when outlawed.
And the violence. The statistics on violence against Dalits are shocking.
Disproportionately high rates. We're talking about assaults, rape, even so-called honor killings.
Often directly linked to caste prejudice. Someone marrying outside their caste or simply asserting their rights.
It's fueled by this ingrained hatred and sense of superiority from dominant castes. So what does this all mean today in the 21st century?
It means, I think, that legal changes are essential, but they're not enough on their own.
Exactly. You can't just legislate away centuries of social conditioning and deeply rooted prejudice overnight. It permeates so many aspects of society.
And it's not just a social issue in a vacuum, is it? It gets tangled up with politics.
Oh, absolutely. The sources point to how caste identity has become a significant factor in the political arena.
How so?
Well, parties and leaders have, sometimes mobilized voters along caste lines, using those identities to build vote banks and gain power.
Which can mean that the actual issues facing marginalized communities, poverty, discrimination, lack of access, get pushed aside in favor of appealing to caste loyalty.
It can definitely distort political priorities and sadly reinforce those very divisions.
And religion, how does that fit in?
That's another layer of complexity. While the philosophical tenets of major Indian religions, especially Hinduism, might speak of equality or spiritual unity,
the reality on the ground can be different.
Yes. Caste-based distinctions and discrimination have become entrenched within religious practices and social customs for many communities.
And it's not just Hinduism, right? The sources mention this affects other religious groups in India, too.
That's an important point. While perhaps less openly discussed sometimes, caste-based discrimination is also found among Muslims, Sikhs, and Christians in India. It cuts across religious lines, reflecting how deeply embedded it is in the social fabric.
So when you connect all these dots, social, political, religious,
you see just how pervasive and deeply rooted this system is. It's woven into the very structure of society in many ways.
But it's not a story without resistance. That's crucial. There have always been people fighting back.
Absolutely essential to highlight that. The fight for equality has strong roots. And you have figures like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar.
A towering figure, born into a Dalit family himself.
Yes, his own lived experience fueled his incredible work. He was a scholar, a jurist, a social reformer, a relentless champion for Dalit rights.
Advocating for education, political representation, social justice.
And, of course, his absolutely pivotal role in drafting the Indian Constitution. He was the chairman of the drafting committee.
And fought tirelessly to ensure provisions against untouchability and discrimination were included. His legacy is immense.
Truly. And that spirit of resistance lives on today. You see it in movements like Dalit Lives Matter, raising awareness globally.
The annual celebration of Ambedkar Jayanti, his birthday, is a major event.
And numerous organizations on the ground, like the National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights, are doing vital work advocacy, legal aid, awareness campaigns.
It really underscores the resilience, doesn't it? The determination to fight for dignity and equality.
Definitely. But, as the sources also acknowledge, overturning centuries of tradition and such deeply embedded hierarchies, it's an uphill battle.
It really makes you think about how fundamental societal change actually happens, doesn't it? It's slow, difficult work.
It really is. It requires challenging not just laws, but attitudes, beliefs, customs, things passed down through generations.
Looking ahead, though, is there reason for hope? The sources mention the younger generation.
Yes, I think that's a significant point. There's a growing awareness and arguably less acceptance of overt caste discrimination among many younger Indians.
Things like social media playing a role, student activism.
For sure. Social media provides platforms for voices that were previously marginalized. Student movements have often been at the forefront of challenging casteism. Education reforms, while slow, also play a part.
And we are seeing, perhaps more than ever, Dalit individuals gaining visibility and influence.
Yes, definitely. In politics and academia, in arts and culture like cinema, even in business. These voices are challenging stereotypes and demanding space.
Which is incredibly important. But progress isn't always linear, is it?
No, it's often 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Resistance from entrenched interests is strong. And that legacy, the source material calls it a silent scar. I think that's quite powerful.
A silent scar, yeah. It implies something deep, painful, and maybe not always openly acknowledged.
Exactly. So the need for continued effort is undeniable. Legal reforms need to be implemented effectively, activism needs support, and perhaps most importantly, societal norms and attitudes need to fundamentally shift.
So to wrap up our deep dive today, it's clear the caste system isn't just some historical curiosity.
Not at all. It's a living, breathing issue with profound ongoing consequences for millions in India.
And the fight for genuine equality, for justice, is very much continuing. It requires sustained effort on many fronts.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Which leads us to a final thought, maybe something for you to mull over after listening.
Sure.
Think about other parts of the world. How have historical social hierarchies, maybe based on race, class, or something else, left their mark and continue to shape societies today?
Are there parallels with India's struggle? What can we learn by looking across these different contexts?
It's just something to consider, how these deep historical structures continue to influence the present everywhere.
A powerful thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's a complex subject, and we appreciate you engaging with it.
Yes, thank you. We hope it's given you some valuable perspective.
Do continue to explore it. And join us next time when we'll delve into another hidden history.